Hey, what's up, guys? This is Nick for the New England Weatherlife.ning.com with another weather update now. The weather update for Sunday morning, it's 8:15 a.m. Actually, just turned 8:16 a.m. And of course, all eyes on the storm coming up late Monday night into Tuesday. So let's take a look at what's going on with it right now. Of course, we're seeing already the storm development coming through southern Illinois. We're seeing a lot of snow developing out of this, although a little bit less than forecast. And that was kind of a trend in yesterday's model guidance that we see a little bit weaker in the early stages, but then with with this morning's guidance, it had a lot of the models were having it explode once you got, say, north of Worcester. And it does remind me of a historical storm back in 2007, and that's something I'm going to get to in a second. But first, I'm going to get to another important feature, which is the polar vortex. What is the polar vortex? Well, I discussed the polar vortex in yesterday's discussion. It was kind of a technical discussion, but I explained everything so it wouldn't be too technical for you. Polar vortex is basically this high pressure that shifts all around Canada and decides the track of the storms. It has rotating wind columns around it, and when the storms get caught up, if it's like to the north, then you might go through New England. If to the west, it might go into New England. However, to the south and east, it usually gets steered off to the mid-Atlantic. That's happened a lot this year, and the polar vortex has been over places like Nova Scotia. But look at, what do you know? By the time you get to the time we were looking for, polar vortex at this point is shifting through the Bay of Maine or Gulf of Maine. But by the time you get to the time we're talking about, it's over Ottawa, and for that reason, it's going to be steering the storm track all the way up into Connecticut. And that's been a trend among the guidance to have a much further westerly storm track, and that means much more snow. So taking a look at the model forecast here, I'm going to want to zoom this in for you. Whoa, and not that much. Let's see what we can do for this. I should not have zoomed it in that much. A little immature, but here we go. Here you see the storms developing by later this evening into this afternoon. It's becoming more of a northerly storm. You can see earlier in the loop it's more of an easterly storm. Look at how it continues to develop. Quite the beast. Moving for the mid-Atlantic, it's a mix of rain and snow for a lot of folks. Interior snow, though. And then late Monday night, it's coming through. It explodes by Tuesday morning. Heavy snow. Look at that stuff coming down in places like Fitchburg. And it forms a calm ahead to the storm, and it continues to move through northern and central New England, and then northern Maine. And I'm going to take you to the total accumulated precipitation. This isn't necessarily how much snow has fallen, to say the least. This is how much liquid rain has fallen from the sky. And you can see, is this the right graphic? Earlier I was looking at something else, but I was looking at a graphic that had about I'd say 14 to 18 inches for places like Worcester down to about northern Rhode Island up to about Derry, New Hampshire. And that seemed well overdone. But this is also doing a pretty good job. So this is the WRF accumulated precipitation probabilities to 72 hours out. And the light green is the 0.25, that's about 4.5. And then your next shade of green is a little darker, it's about 6 inches, and then your next shade is about 8. And then you've got about a foot of snow coming through Worcester with that 1 inch line. And so that's what we're looking at. So what storm does it remind me of? I love to go into historical weather for storms, and it's served me well in the past. It served me well earlier this year with the blizzard of '83, doing very well with the first snowmageddon that we had back in December for places like DC. It ended up affecting us too, same with the blizzard of '83. But what historical storm does this remind me of? Well, it was back in January 15th through 18th. Drum roll, please. Here it was. Whoa! 18 to 24, Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, northern New Hampshire, much of Maine, 15 to 18 inches for much of New Hampshire, much of Vermont, Adirondacks, much of Maine, a foot of snow eastern Maine once you get north of the Pike, and Litchfield County, Connecticut, 9 to 12 inches for these areas, and then 1 to 6 inches for far southern New England. Places like Cape Cod probably won't remember it, but I remember tracking it. And I was just getting into extreme tracking the weather back then, and I had quite a treat. And what's interesting is I think that we might see some similarity in between the two in between the two storms, in that um, they were forecasting a lot less than we ended up seeing. At this point, I mean, the forecast for this storm obviously hasn't verified yet, but I remember weather.com said about 4 to 6 inches for me. I'm located between 495 and 128. They said about 4 to 6 inches, and I ended up getting in the 12 zone. And what's interesting is it's because it bombed so well. And at this point, they're forecasting about a foot of snow. Well, actually more like 6 to 10 inches for central Mass, central Connecticut, Hartford, New Haven, Worcester. Yes, yes. But what we have to acknowledge here is these storms both bombed under very favorable conditions. And what I mean by that is these storms, they entered an area of very high dew points of 20 to 30. And is that the case for this storm? What do you know? By the time you go to 42 to 48 hours out, you've got your dew points that are hanging around 20 to 30 through southern New England, a little less in northern New England, and a lot less in the higher elevations. But this is favorable for quite a bombing of the storm, and that would verify about 14 to 18 for central Mass. So I could go on hours and hours about this storm, but at this point, I don't know. We're going to have to wait for this evening's guidance, and we're going to have to wait for tomorrow morning's guidance. By then, they should be in great agreement, and I'll be looking forward to the onset of those models. For now, you can expect at least 6 inches for a lot of folks to central Mass, central Connecticut. That's it for now, guys. See you later. It's Nick for the New England Weatherlife.ning.com.